Across Alabama's humid night skies, strange lights have carved impossible angles and burned memories into the minds of those who looked up at the wrong, or perhaps the right moment. Montgomery, Alabama, 2:45 a.m., July 24, 1948. I had just trimmed the Douglas DC-3 for cruise when a dull red glow bloomed above the horizon. Moonlight made a white ribbon across the Alabama River far below, but this light was sharper, angry, like molten steel. "Clarence," I called back to my co-pilot, John Whitted. "You seeing that?" My voice did not betray the sudden pounding in my chest, but my palms began to sweat against the yoke. John slid his seat up beside me. "Looks like a new army jet," he said, hopeful, leaning forward as though that simple label could domesticate the thing barreling toward us. I wanted to believe him. Since the war, the sky had filled with experimental craft, and I'd cheated death more than once while testing them. But jets don't drift without sound or stutter like a lantern losing fuel. This thing glided, no wings, no tail, just a cigar-shaped fuselage, lit from within by 2 perfect rows of rectangular windows. Magnesium white light spilled through each pane, erasing stars in its path. That impossible calm dress-right dress of windows frightened me more than any flak burst I'd seen over Europe. "Banking left," I barked. My muscles acted before my mind could register what the maneuver meant for the 30 passengers dozing behind us. The DC-3 lurched as I threw her into a leftward dive. Gravity pinned my stomach tight against my spine, and someone in the cabin screamed. Even over the engine knock, I heard seatbelts click and glassware shatter. The object streaked past our starboard wing so close I swear I felt its heat. For a heartbeat, its nose aligned with our cockpit. Through the windows, I glimpsed something like a cockpit of its own. Dark silhouettes framed in incandescence. Then a tail erupted in a blossom of blue-white flame. The craft vaulted upward at a steep angle and stabbed through a wispy cloud, turning it into a brief torch before vanishing entirely. We watched it for maybe 10 seconds, yet the imprint seared itself deeper than hours of combat duty ever had. John exhaled, the way a diver does after breaking the surface. "Lord Almighty," he whispered, pressing a trembling hand against the cold plexiglass. He was always a steady stick. Seeing him rattled shook me worse than the near miss. I leveled the aircraft and keyed the interphone. "Folks, this is your captain. Apologies for the abrupt maneuver. We appear to have avoided an object. Everything is under control." Even as I said it, I wondered if the words were true. In Atlanta, we filed the report with the Civil Aeronautics Authority and the Air Force boys from Project Sign. They grilled us separately for hours, searching for inconsistencies. I told them every detail: the flank of windows, the fuselage length, close to 100 feet, and the fiery tail that vanished like a match blown out in a gale. One investigator leaned back, folded his arms, and asked if I'd ever seen a meteor. I stared him down. "Meteors don't have rows of lighted windows, Captain." Days later, the papers were calling it a cigar-shaped ship. Skeptics said we'd misidentified a bolide, but John and I knew better. The sky over Montgomery had been clear, nothing on radar, nothing on any flight plan. Passengers recalled only a flash, but that flash had change-of-course intelligence. I still fly, but every time my nav lights reflect off a cloud bank, I brace for that red haze and those blinding windows. A man can log 10,000 accident-free hours and feel proud. Yet a single impossible moment rewrites the book of what the night sky can hold, and pride becomes the thin fabric between order and the yawning unknown. Fife, Alabama, February 11th, 1989. I was the on-duty police chief, population 967, 1 bar and grill, and a single stoplight that never seemed to sync with itself. Friday nights were usually domestic calls and loose cattle, but that winter evening the radio crackled with something I'd never heard in 20 years of law enforcement. Panic from every direction at once. Chief Carver, I'm out on County 50. There's something in the sky. Big as a football field, no noise. Officer Steed's voice wavered, half static, half disbelief. Before I could answer, dispatch patched in Mrs. Garner from Sand Mountain Drive. Bill, it's hovering over the pasture. Triangular. Lights on each corner. My dogs won't come out of the storm cellar. The phone lines jammed as people swamped the switchboard. I threw on my parka and headed for the ridge. The stars glittered frost-sharp, but near the tree line, a darker wedge blocked part of the constellations. 3 red lights traced its outline, and a 4th pulsed along the belly like a slow heartbeat. No engine roar, no rotor chop, just the hum of February wind across barren cotton. Steed pulled up, eyes wild. You seeing it too, Chief? His flashlight beam was useless against that silent colossus. We watched, breath clouding between us, as the shape drifted east at a crawl that mocked gravity. Radios erupted with new sightings. Kids at the basketball game saw it. An older couple claimed it skimmed their roof and shut off the TV. For 45 minutes the object meandered across DeKalb County, then shot upward, straight as an arrow, and disappeared among the stars. Around midnight, a second craft arrived. Same triangle, different flight path, as though mapping. Panic turned to a strange carnival of lawn chairs and binoculars. Highway 75 clogged with pickup trucks. Reporters arrived Sunday morning, and by Monday, national networks were broadcasting from our high school parking lot. Fife, once famous only for tomato farms, became Alabama's UFO capital overnight. City Hall couldn't ignore the economic upside. By summer, we stamped T-shirts that read, "I got fifed by a UFO." Come August, the inaugural UFO Days Festival launched with balloon rides, funnel cakes, and a cover band playing Purple Haze. Folks danced under the very sky that had scared them stiff 6 months earlier. Tourism spiked, but late at night the talk always circled back to that silent craft. Some of my deputies swore the Air Force set up shop in a barn outside neighboring Geraldine. Black SUVs, unmarked helicopters. You hear enough stories and patterns start to form like crop circles. Me? I just keep a Polaroid of that chilly ridge taped inside my locker. When the lights are off, it's just a dark rectangle, but tilt it toward the lamp and you catch a faint V shape blotting out Orion's belt. Proof enough for me that we're not alone, and that a tiny town on Sand Mountain once stared into the abyss and saw its own reflection blinking back in red. Tuscaloosa County, Alabama, October 2024. The overnight shift at W. Baer. 95.3 pays the bills, but only if coffee, static, and small-town rumors count as currency. At 2:07 a.m., my playlist was running on automation when the studio phone rang. Breathless male voice, "Turn your tower cam east." Something's dancing over Cottondale. I wanted to brush it off. Radio attracts night owls spinning yarns. But his raw terror infected me. I punched up the weather camera feed fixed atop our transmitter. Against the sodium orange glow of the truck stop, a bright orb jittered like a trapped firefly, then zipped 90 degrees right, instantaneous. No drone I'd ever flown in college could pull that vector. I hit record. Outside, cicadas had fallen mute. The orb slid toward the Black Warrior River, trailing a faint ion green smear. Out of habit, I toggled the mic. W. Baer late night. We're seeing something strange over Cottondale. Call if you've got eyes on it. Within 5 minutes, every line lit up, and social media exploded with shaky videos tagged # Cottondale lights. Nobody could agree on color. Some swore crimson, others indigo, but everyone agreed on speed. Unreal. A deputy I know texted, "Sheriff's out here. No aircraft on radar." 6 minutes later, the station's emergency generator surged for no reason. Grid power was fine. The orb bloomed overhead, brilliance flooding the control room windows like welding flash. I dropped to the floor, skin prickling with microwave heat. My ears popped as though pressure had changed inside the building. Then silence, total cosmic vacuum silence. When I dared peek, the orb was gone. The clock read 2:29 a.m., yet my last conscious memory felt seconds old. I played back the tower cam footage. At 2:14 a.m., the image pixelated, and a smear of white light surged toward the lens before the file corrupted. Our transmitter logs showed a power spike that fried 3 relays. Morning brought NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center scientist on our sister station claiming meteors, space junk from a defunct Chinese rocket, he said. But dozens of eyewitnesses described right-angle turns. Meteors don't do geometry homework. By afternoon, the national desk ran a 30-second blurb, then moved on to politics. Yet in every local diner that week, people spoke of missing time, microwaved phones, and deer carcasses found perfectly desiccated along Holt Road. The official file reads, Unexplained Aerial Phenomenon, UAP. To me, it's a gap in reality where 22 minutes and part of my certainty disappeared. Some nights I still man the booth. When the old neon clock hits 2:07 a.m., the fluorescent lights sometimes flicker, as though something enormous is passing between the studio and the moon. I keep the phone lines open, coffee hot, and my finger poised above the record button, waiting for the sky to whisper through the static again. Mobile Bay, Alabama, March 10th, 2025. We pushed off at dusk, shrimp nets piled like tan cobwebs on the Fantail Sally. Gulf water was glass, only the diesel chug and gull cries breaking the stillness. By 9 p.m., lanterns swayed over the deck, attracting hungry silver shapes in the wake. My deckhand Luis and I swapped ghost stories to kill the boredom. At 9:46 p.m., conversation froze. The horizon to the north lit up with a searing white pulse, bright enough to cast shadows of rigging across the wheelhouse roof. Flare? Luis asked. I shook my head. Flares arc, sputter, then fade. This burned steady, then morphed from white to electric green. It dropped altitude so fast my ears popped, then skimmed the bay's surface, reflection rippling like molten glass. Water hissed where the light touched. A chemical sizzle. I grabbed the VHF. Coast Guard mobile. This is trawler Fantail Sally. Unidentified fireball, west-northwest. Heading 140 degrees, maybe 2 miles. Static answered. Seconds later, the object rolled, literally tumbled end over end, igniting blue-orange tongues along its tail before vaulting skyward. A rooster tail of steam erupted below, as if the sea itself exhaled. The thing vanished into thin cloud at maybe 20,000 feet. 4 breaths later, a sonic whump rattled every rivet in the railing. Our nets slapped against the deck. Luis crossed himself. Back at the dock, we found half the harbour awake. A woman pointed at the night sky, insisting she'd seen sparks like a firework, but going up. Smartphones showed grainy clips, a white teardrop shredding into pieces that glowed then winked out. The American Meteor Society logged 6 witness reports across Alabama and Georgia. Their map pinned one right over Mobile Bay at 9:50 p.m. Analysts labeled it a fireball, magnitude -10. But meteors don't fly horizontal at sea level or bounce skyward like skipping stones. 2 days later, a NASA spokesperson blamed re-entering space debris. He sounded certain, yet wouldn't explain the perfect ring of scorched barnacles on a buoy 1,100 yards from where we'd first sighted the thing. Luis keeps a charred chunk of flotsam he scooped from the water, a lump of fused sand and metal that sets off his EM field meter every time there's a lightning storm. I've fished these waters 30 years. Hurricanes, water spouts, St. Elmo's fire. I know nature's wrath. But that night on Mobile Bay felt observed, as though the ocean's ceiling cracked and something peered in, then fled when it realized we'd seen it too. When dawn painted the sky pink, the gulls returned and the generators hummed like any other day. But sometimes, just sometimes, when the diesel engine idles at night, I swear the static in the radio whispers coordinates no chart can plot, urging me back to the place where the sea burned like a second sun and gravity briefly forgot its lines,